Welcome to the Joyful Nourishment Podcast. This is a podcast about our relationship with food and eating, body image, eating disorder recovery, mental health, and more. I am your host, Lynn Thorstensen, a registered nutrition therapist and body image coach based in the west of Ireland. And I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome to the podcast, Gillian. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And I was so excited to interview you for us to have this conversation because your expertise is in like the relationship with exercise, over exercising, exercise resistance, and you have a lot of experience working with people in eating disorder recovery and disordered eating and chronic dieting. And I feel like we don't talk enough about a relationship to exercise on either end of those spectrums. So I'm really looking forward to have this conversation with you today.
Yeah, thank you. It's interesting. My degree, my undergrad and my master's degree are in exercise physiology, and I rejected the fitness industry a long time ago. But in the last few years, especially working in eating disorder recovery, I've come back to the fitness piece, or not the fitness piece, but the exercise piece, the movement piece, and it is a whole different world. So I appreciate you talking about it.
Yeah. And you said that was your primary degree was in exercise and physiology. And I mean, we know each other a bit, but I know the listeners won't know you. So what took you to that space of exercise and physiology? Like, were you a sporty person, or did you have some other motives of getting into that space in earlier in your life?
Yeah, I have to admit it was all diet culture. When I was very young, about 7 or 8, probably more 8, um, I developed an eating disorder, but I was not diagnosed. I was never diagnosed, to be honest. Um, but I didn't know that that's what was going on. And that had a lot to do with trauma and things that were going on in my life at the time. But of course, um, from this, binge eating that I was doing, and this complicated relationship with food, once I hit puberty, I started having, what at the time I called challenges with my weight. It's just my body being my body, but at the time I didn't know that. And um, I was not sporty. I was the person that avoided high school physical education courses. I did everything I could to get out of them, hated them, never picked for teams, never, nothing like that. Um, I managed to spend a whole year not doing PE, because I had a root canal that I had done, and I managed to work out so that I didn't have to do it, physical education. I don't know how I managed that. So I avoided it at all costs. But in my late teenage years, when I was in college, I had to take some movement classes just for general education. And so I'm dating myself, but this is when the aerobic dance thing was kind of at its height. It had been building. I remember my mom going to jazzercise, but it was really at its height at this point. And so I took an aerobics class. I took step aerobics when step aerobics was big, and I enjoyed it. And as a result of getting into it, I started losing weight. Granted, it was temporary. This is where my weight cycling started, and it went up and down, up and down, up and down. But that initial um, weight loss and seeing me exercise, people started asking for help and for me to support them. And I really enjoy doing that. And because I like helping people. And eventually I became a personal trainer. And I really got into it because of my um initial weight loss, and believing that exercise was the solution. And I started taking more courses on health and nutrition and fitness and all of those things. and did eventually stop my degree in computer science and switched over to exercise physiology and kinesiology is what they called it in my undergraduate work. Um, but the funny thing is that it was just weight cycling. It was just up and down. And even as a successful personal trainer, I worked with so many people in their homes. My weight went up and down. My, um, what I didn't know was an eating disorder got so much worse. The binging was much more, um, the swings were a lot more. And about 4 years into being a personal trainer, I heard about this emerging industry of coaching. And of course, it wasn't sports coaching, it was coaching mindset and that type of thing. And I met someone who was very early in the industry doing coaching for fitness, working with people over the phone. Um, and helping motivate them without needing me to be there, which I really, really appealed to me because I was feeling like a highly paid babysitter in many cases for my clients. And that wasn't serving them. I also noticed that they were having many of the same problems with food that I was, but I didn't know how to solve that. Um, so as I went through this coaching program, through her, I met a dietitian who, because I told her about my issues and at first I kind of hid them because I thought I was the only one. But I told her about my issues eventually, and she introduced me to a dietitian who introduced me to intuitive eating. And, it wasn't overnight, but it was a process, but it was a process that led to eventually realizing this is the solution is making peace with food, making peace with my body, not fighting it all the time. I did eventually find peace and realized this exercise thing, while there's lots of benefits to it, it's not the solution. And so I moved away from that. I got trained in intuitive eating and was someone very early, early 2000s who started working with clients on intuitive eating, not as a dietitian, but as a coach. And I just never looked back from there.
Yeah, and just yeah, we have covered. I've spoken to a few people about intuitive eating on the podcast, and again, it's just so powerful, like how that sort of work, like the difference that can make, but also that how challenging it is for people to kind of to arrive at the place where like you can't do another diet. It just isn't possible. Like it's not. I think I hear as well that often it's like people's commonest is it's like the body says no, no more,
Yep.
no more restriction, no more of this yo-yoing or weight cycling, no more of this kind of crazy swinging on off, you know, and then often then being in a bigger body than they have been or what they would want to be and feeling like what are my what now then, because it can feel really stuck, but it's so rewarding when you see people often with support working through that and coming out the other end in ways that
Hmm.
doesn't feel possible. And the other thing I think with exercise is this thing like what you were talking about, like when you were working as a personal trainer, when coming at it is like we're exercising to lose weight. And then, it might happen initially and then the weight comes back on as it tends to do, that there's this kind of, then it's like, oh, well, there's no point of exercising then. Well, there's
Right.
no, like what's the point? And then people drop it, even though they might have had noticed other benefits from doing it while they
Yeah.
were doing it. But if it doesn't result or if the weight loss isn't sustained or sustainable, then it's like, well, do I only exercise because I was on a diet?
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely. That's one of the biggest challenges that I've seen is, um, in there's two extremes. There's the compulsive movement, um, which tends to show up a lot more in traditional in quotes, eating disorders. And and then the other side is the resistance. And most of my work up until the last few years was dealing with the resistance side. And what I know about that, I certainly experienced, I've done both. I've done the compulsive, um, when I was very much wrapped up in exercise and like I have to do it, I have to do it every day. And it was very much associated with the eating disorder stuff that was going on for me. But the other side of it is when we tie movement to dieting or tie movement to what we eat, and we're trying to balance this energy balance thing that isn't really a thing. It's not as black and white as most people would make it seem, or our culture tells us. Um, then food and movement become the two parts of the equation, and it just isn't that simple. There's been a lot of research and a lot of discussion in the last 10-15 years that exercise may not be one of the best things you can do for weight. And of course, we know that it's not, because trying to manage your weight is not the best solution either, or best approach. But I've what happens is people will stop exercising when they inevitably fall out of that diet or that program or that plan or whatever it is they're doing. Not only does the restrictive eating or the ideal quote perfect eating that they're trying to achieve that is harmful, that they stop doing that, but they also stop doing the movement
Yeah.
because they can only see movement as a way to lose weight. And yeah, like you said, there are a lot of other benefits and people do feel those, but they can't see it because they're so wrapped up in I have to lose weight, I have to change my body. It's all about food, it's all about exercise, and there are a million other factors that are involved, but we're not told that. Um, and because it's so tied up with movement, food and movement, movement becomes punishment. Oh, I ate something, and so now I need to go exercise this off, which anyone who has tracked calories knows that is really hard to do.
It's miserable. I have this memory of, I think I was in my early 20s and I had, gained weight, and I saved up to go to this local gym, which was a 20-minute drive. I had a physical work, but I was eating, I was eating a lot of stuff, and maybe not outward binging at that time, but definitely eating for comfort and all kinds of things. And anyway, I have this memory of being on like a treadmill or one of those exercise bikes in the gym, after paying a fairly substantial amount of money for, according to my income at the time. And like I had been on the thing for, I don't know, 25 minutes or something, and it was incredibly boring and not easy. And then I looked at the machine and I had burned like 200 and something calories. And I'm like, I just ate a Mars bar and it's like twice as much as that.
Yeah.
Not that any of those is wrong with it, but it just felt like,
Right.
oh my God, how much do I have to do this in order to like burn the calories? And it just like, it just wasn't rewarding.
Yeah.
So then it's like, what's the point, And you're back to that,
Yeah.
right? What's the point? Which is very much diet talk, or that kind of internalized diet talk. It's like, no point to doing anything because it doesn't matter. But that's not
Yeah.
true either, right? For like people who are able and want to move their bodies. Like the research is showing that actually exercise and movement practices are beneficial independent of weight for like
Absolutely.
physical health.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it for so many reasons. I mean, there are so many other benefits such as stress management, um, warding off accelerated depression or anxiety, just feeling better about yourself or your body. There's been research that shows that movement can do that, and it doesn't have to be this, you know, pounding the floor, jumping up and down, you know, intense movement. And I think that's another thing that people get caught up in is it has to be aerobic and it has to be calorie burning, or it has to be, I don't know if you remember years ago, everything was about being fat burning.
Mm,
And that came from one piece of research that was incredibly flawed. I'm embarrassed to say that the guy who put that out was actually from my alma mater of my undergrad work. Um, and it was all about, well, this is carb burning versus fat burning, and it's like the whole thing is so convoluted. And what we've learned about food in the last decade or so is that everyone's body responds differently to a particular food. It's not exactly the same for everyone. It's the same thing with movement. And but what I see people doing is like, well, I have to do it for 30 minutes or 45 minutes, otherwise it's not worth it. Or um, it has to be, my heart rate has to be this high or whatever. Otherwise it's not worth it. And it's like, okay, so you're saying it's not worth it because you're tying it to trying to change your body. But
yeah.
taking a 5-minute walk, going outside, changing scene, getting some fresh air, getting the blood pumping is worth it for
Yeah.
all the benefits that can bring. Sitting on a yoga mat and doing some stretching for 5 or 10 minutes is worth it when you're taking out the food and movement stuff and
Yeah.
uncoupling them.
I think, and I feel like it feels so important to continue having that kind of conversation that, and I know I'm going to digress a bit here, but like the food and movement has been so tied to weight loss and the weight loss with the health that it's really challenging to just separate them and say, just because you decide you don't want to do another diet or your body says I'm not doing another diet doesn't mean that we just have to abandon all sort of health supporting behaviors, and also
Right.
that they all of a sudden they have no other benefits or effects on our physiology if we don't lose weight. None
Mhm.
of those are true. It's not true,
Right.
you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh, it just makes me so frustrated because there's so many it's so mixed messages, and it feels then that telling people just to lose weight is like is really lazy medicine, when
Hmm.
and also and then the flip side of that is the kind of, well, if I don't do everything 120% at all times, it's not worth it, it's not worth my
Yeah.
effort. So
Yes.
I mean it means I think we're just stuck then in that sort of same binary thinking that dieting
Exactly.
kind of loves feeding.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that's always a clue, like a red flag that there's some diet thinking or there's some diet mentality involved when there is that binary thinking or that all or nothing thinking that, I only do this when I do that kind of, thinking. Um, and that's why, from a coaching perspective, or anyone can coach, dietitians can coach and therapists can coach, just asking good questions like, well, is that true? Or, was there ever a time that you moved your body in the past that had nothing to do with trying to make it look different, or, change your weight or whatever? And for the majority of people, not everyone, but for the majority of people, they can remember it felt fun to play
Mm.
on the playground, or run around, be active as a kid. And we can still get those same benefits. It's still it's instinctive, in humans. I do want to say that there's no reason why people have to move, and I never tell people that they must, especially if they've had a difficult relationship with movement or their bodies or food or whatever in the past. um it doesn't make you, there's no, just like with food, there's no morality around it. And I think we have to be really careful when people say, oh, well, everyone should be moving, and everyone should be doing it like this or like that, because that's also inherently ableist. And there are socioeconomic factors, and there's, physical factors and things like that. Certain people don't have the physical capability of moving like, culture tells us we should be. But there are benefits that have absolutely nothing to do with changing your body. And those benefits are probably in the long run, more important depending on your values and what's important to you in your life,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
hard to discern when you're caught up in a diet and movement cycle that's all you're focused on.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I think that's so true. And I see it too. And I feel that it's just sometimes challenging to see or to spot for oneself when like when it sort of swings the other way. Like, so you talked about like more compulsive exercise. So there's obviously like the high end compulsive exercise that happens in somebody who's malnourished with, say, anorexia nervosa. But then there's like kind of a trajectory there, just a bit like with disordered eating. It may not fit into a box, or but it's problematic, and it becomes problematic for the person. And what are like what are some of the challenges, like both, I suppose for my first question would be how could you spot that for yourself if you kind of start wondering, or if you have somebody around you that you're just kind of wondering, I mean, is this person's relationship with exercise like healthy or helpful or nourishing?
Yeah, yeah. Um, so I think that it is really important, especially if someone is dealing with an eating disorder and or disordered eating, malnourishment, even undernourishment, that we're all aware of, encouraging exercise. I hear that a lot when my doctor told me I should keep exercising, or, there's the more is better type of mentality that's out there. And there is too much. My work in eating disorders over the last couple of years has really shown me what that looks like. I certainly experienced it personally, but um, I have seen the extreme side of it. And um, it comes, at all different levels across the spectrum. But one thing that's really important to look out for, just on a behavioral level, is your movement, is your exercise practice interfering with your life? Are you not going out to events because you have to go to the gym? Are you avoiding, can you miss a day without that being a problem where you're not thinking about it all the time? I don't want to like share behaviors, but I have seen things like, um, people neglecting sleep or neglecting time with family or friends or even work or other things like that in order to exercise because they have to get it in. So when it's interfering, when you would when you're saying I need to exercise today, I haven't done my exercise, versus a friend comes into town that you haven't seen in a while, and you're like, no, I can't. Or things like that. Or I can't move on with my day, or I can't function without my exercise. These are definite red flags. And usually what that exercise looks like is some kind of high intensity cardiovascular type of activity, because, going back to the conversation about it's worth it or is it worth it? Um, it usually looks like that. As far as symptoms and signs that we may experience, overtraining, um, which could be compulsive movement, it could just be, doing too much and not getting enough rest or enough food or whatever. Um, it's very interesting because the symptoms are things like either you don't sleep well or you're getting too much sleep, or you're not hungry, your appetite has really plummeted, or you're overly hungry all the time. So there's these extremes on both ends often that are symptomatic of doing too much. The first thing I look at when I'm talking to somebody about movement, especially on the compulsive side, is where does rest fit into your movement plan? You know,
Mm,
if you have a movement plan, usually they have a movement plan, um, or at least rules around what they're supposed to be doing in their minds. And rest is usually thrown out the window. Rest is not a consideration. Rest is absolutely essential. And one of like exercise physiology 101 is rest is when the body recovers and builds back up stronger from the movement that you've done. And that's very true for strength training. It's also true for cardiovascular training. It's true for any kind of movement. And we just throw rest out the window and then wonder
mm,
why we're sick and we're tired and we're dragging and it's hard to get through this workout or whatever. Um, as far as resistance, um, dreading your movement, not wanting to do it, doing it at the very end of the day because you've had your clothes on all day, but you've just found other things to do. If you're avoiding it, I would really take a good look at that and ask, why am I avoiding it? What does exercise mean to me? What does movement mean to me? Um, and then what do I want it to be, if anything? And if you need to take a break, take a break. And I'm all for that. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, people who have been forced to take breaks in the past often come back stronger. And so it's really important to see that. I think another mindset thing to consider is um, exercise versus movement. Movement is any way that you move your body. Me moving my arm right now, that's movement. Exercise has the rules and the all or nothing um, often. And so am I wanting to move or am I trying to exercise? Movement is also a process. It's process oriented. It's not, there may be an outcome you're looking for, like I want to have more stamina or I want to be able to chase my kids or whatever. Um, but exercise often, the way that it is in our culture is, um, you either do it right or you don't do it. It should be perfect. It should be all of those elements that are problematic. Where movement is, how am I feeling in this moment? Am I enjoying this? Does this feel good? How does my body respond to this? And um, you know, it's really it's more mindful, to put it simply. And so is this outcome based or is it process based? Is it in the moment? And you can have both, but
yeah.
generally the problematic is usually outcome based.
Yeah, that's a really nice distinction that movement is any way you move your body, but exercise often has like structure or maybe rules and it is more outcome based. And you can, of course, have like if we put sort of slower movement practice, like of movement practices like dance, yoga, Pilates, those kind of a body based, like as opposed to then like you have a whole host of like sports, which is like movement and exercise, but they're often outcome based for the performance of the sport.
Yeah.
And versus when, there's gym or gym classes or weightlifting or like stuff that again can be movement but once it's tacked into like weight loss in particular as an outcome, it just becomes something very different.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely. And I know that a lot of medical professionals and health professionals will say, well, like something like diabetes, they'll say, well, you should move, um, you should exercise. And I don't think they make the distinction, or maybe they don't know, or I don't know what it is, but somebody with diabetes, there is a ton of benefit to moving, glucose mobilization and I mean so many different things. But usually when someone is given the recommendation to exercise for diabetes, it's in the service of weight loss, and that turns them off to it. They either resist or they do too much, depending on the situation, and they're not developing a healthy, peaceful, sustainable relationship with movement in that case. So, asking yourself, why am I doing this? What am I hoping to get from this? And am I enjoying it is really, really critical. A lot of my clients, working with intuitive eating for so many years, a lot of my clients, when we talk about movement, um, they'll say, "Oh, so you're saying that I should do movement like I do food, do it intuitively." And I'm like, "That's a great framework. I love that."
Yeah.
What does that look like? What is intuitive movement? It's, there are no rules, but in my mind, some of the things that come up are, how does my body feel today? You know, does my body want to move? Does it make sense for me today? Do I have the time? Do I have the space? What do I want to do? What would feel good? Um, Promising yourself, if you go out and you walk and 10 minutes feels like enough, that you come back, that you don't keep going. How much rest do I need? Looking at the bigger picture, and really letting your body dictate what's right
Yeah.
for you in that moment.
Yeah, and it also feels like in the when like the bigger one is like then picking movement practices that you enjoy. Like you said,
Mhm.
the enjoyment of it is crucial. So, what are the things that I enjoy? Like for me, I discovered like, the what do you call them? The circuit kind of training practices or these HIIT, like the HIIT kind of ones that was all the rage there, maybe I don't know, a
Yeah.
decade ago or something. I did a few of those at the time. I was going to a place where there was a lot of like classes and stuff, but I was doing mostly Pilates with a woman who ran the studio at the time. And then they offered other things as well, like spinning and some aerobics and some. And I remember doing some of these HIIT classes. I really hated it. I did not enjoy it one bit. And I was like, I don't care if it's 30 minutes because, and you're like, oh, you get it done because it's like, that's not enjoyable for me. I'd rather be there for an hour in a Pilates class and maybe struggling a bit, but even though it was hard, I enjoyed it. Or I'll
Yeah.
be hiking for 4 hours or something. This just, for me, it is, oh, just go in and get it done to have it like, it just never felt right. I think it's coming back to that memory of being on the treadmill and having
Yes.
this. What's the point of this? As many like I've just eaten twice as many in the bar that took me 3 seconds to eat. Like what?
Mhm.
What's the point? Whereas doing um movement practices that A was enjoyable while doing them because my body tends to feel really stiff and sore after most exercise, regardless of my fitness levels or whatever. Um, I might as well enjoy it while I'm doing it, otherwise it doesn't feel. I'm like, why did I do that? And there is something lovely when you feel all of a sudden that your body's capable of doing things that you didn't think it was capable of doing.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think you've hit on something that's so important. There are some people who just really don't like moving, and maybe their motivation is, I feel better when I'm done. And that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that, because there are some people like that, and I kind of tend to be more like that myself. But there was a model that was put forth about, um I forget the terms they use, but like in the context of mindful movement, and managing compulsive movement and things like that. And it was kind of a pyramid. It was there were three levels to this pyramid. The bottom level was safety. So making sure, can my body handle this? Am I in a condition to be able to do this? Or, where do I start that's safe? Of course, is it safe to move my body? Because, am I eating enough? Am I nourished? Am I getting rest? Blah, blah, blah. Is my environment safe where I'm going to go? run or walk or whatever. So safety is the main concern. Do people know where I am when I go out? The second part was the process. So, am I enjoying this, or does it at least feel good? Doesn't feel distressing or like I'm going to pass out in 2 minutes or whatever. So can I be mindful? Can I tell how it's feeling in my body? Can I sustain it, relatively well? And then the top part was joy. And, so what am I getting from it? Is it fun? Is it pleasurable? Is it at least pleasurable when I'm done and I'm glad I did it and I'm glad I moved my body and that I could do it? Um, and those three considerations are really important. And a lot of people, will go back to the no pain, no gain. And I think it's been proven that the whole thing doesn't work. That's not sustainable. And it no pain, no gain essentially is leading to repetitive stress injury or other kinds of injuries. And if we can remain somewhat mindful in the process of moving our body, we can also be more aware of when our body's saying, no, we need to back off and prevent injury. So there's so many different pieces to it, but safety, process, which I would call mindfulness, and joy are
Yeah.
are the three pieces that I really like.
I really like that too. And even in somebody who's maybe have to back off and knowing when it's safe to bring in exercise again, and then working towards like establishing a better, more nourishing relationship with exercise and movement, like that sense of safety. And then do I enjoy it through the process? And then, you know, like that it is something that feels like good, even if the process is maybe not something you super enjoy, but it feels good afterwards, then it is something we'd return to. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Something to really kind of think about.
Yeah. One
So,
thing I wanted to mention about safety, if I could, I think it's
mhm,
important. When dealing with an eating disorder, especially when someone is still malnourished or not eating enough, um, you know, a lot of people, what I have seen is a lot of people are using exercise to manage anxiety or stress or whatever. And they will say, this is the only way. This is the only way I know how to manage this anxiety, and I have to do it, and blah, blah, blah. And so I just want to mention really quickly that a big part of that is it does come down to a different kind of safety, which is feeling safe in your nervous system. Um, and so your nervous system has learned that movement or exercise or whatever does help. But if it's going to be life-threatening or complicated, in your recovery and you have to take a break, there are other things you can do. So remembering that what you're looking for on a systemic or on a basic level, I guess, is nervous system safety. And that can be found in other ways. That can be found in connection, in learning self-compassion, in other practices, maybe even slower movement practices, if that's allowed at the moment. Remembering it's temporary because you are recovering. But that's just a really important piece that I just wanted to mention is, and a big part of the work that I've done in the last couple of years is what else can I do to manage my stress, my anxiety when I can't move temporarily.
yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because that is a really important point as well. And I think it's actually really common. I think maybe even in that space as well for people, like we talked previous, like what are the red flags that maybe exercise is a problem? And that could be using exercise as a way of managing mental health challenges, like particularly around anxiety and stress and so forth, like that. Then that can put the body in an undernourished state if the food intake isn't high enough to match that, which actually often makes the body more anxious also.
Yes.
So it's like a perpetuating cycle. And helping people develop more tools in their toolbox, just like we do with food or restriction, if that is the primary coping mechanism, to have that for co-regulation, nervous system regulation, so that they're not, if they need to take a break from exercise, it's like it is possible to do that, because there are other ways to get that same needs met, especially when
Yeah,
exercise now isn't safe anymore for the physical body, or it's just putting it in a deficit that exacerbates other issues or challenges.
absolutely. And there are, for anyone who's listening that isn't aware, there is a protocol um, called C's Safe Exercise at Every Stage, which is an approach to movement in eating disorder recovery. And it has a stage, like 4 stages of when certain types of movement is appropriate based on symptoms and signs and lab work and things like that. And that's a really helpful model because in the past in eating disorder work, um, it's traditionally been no exercise, no movement whatsoever. And more, people like Jennifer Gaudiotti and other professionals in that field are saying, no, we need to incorporate movement as early as we can, but there are times when it's just absolutely not safe.
Yeah, thank you. And maybe we can find a way to link to some more of that
Mhm.
information too.
Yeah.
So, as we are kind of coming to a close for this conversation, Gillian, what are something that you would say to somebody that have a difficult relationship with movement? Like, what are 3 things that you would like to put out in this conversation that may be helpful for them?
Yeah, so kind of just repeating some of the things that we've talked about. One is um that if you are wrapped up in a compulsive movement type of cycle or situation, asking yourself, what is it, why do I feel like I need to move? And is it about safety? Is it because that's what my nervous system knows? And knowing that there are other ways to establish that safety. So, in that case, you may be working with a team, so talking with your team about it, um, and working on, somatic practices and mindfulness and all of those things that, everyone kind of rolls their eyes at, but they absolutely do work. Um, and remembering it's temporary as well. Second is that movement is not an obligation. Some people get so wrapped up in the guilt and shame of not moving their bodies, or if they've had to take a break and then they want to go back. I've worked with people who say, I can't go back to where I was, to this trainer or this gym, because everyone knows what I looked like before and now I look like this. You know, there is no obligation to look a certain way, to be a certain level of fitness, to nothing. You are a human being just like anyone else. And, no one, we are going to get judgment from other people, but I think we think we're getting judged more than we do. And you get to have your challenges just like any other human being. And so if movement's not right for you at the moment, or if you have to start from square one, which we never really do start back from square one. But if you're feeling that way, that's okay. Self-compassion, it's amazing. Um, and then third, I think movement, just remembering that movement is any way that you move your body, and there are no rules. I know all the rules. I was trained in all of that. I had to memorize it all for my certifications and my degree and all of that, and I have rejected it all, and I'm still standing. um, I do not use a heart rate monitor anymore. I don't track anything. I do what feels good, and it has served me really well because it's much more sustainable. So I think those are the main things.
Thank you. I think they're really big points, and deserve some time to sort of even like letting that land. Um, because this is a quite challenging topic, and it's a difficult one because there's so much stuff thrown around, like with, like you said, you go, oh, well, you need to exercise, but like, what does that mean, and how, and also then where, like, when people are even at a level that isn't really helpful, that there's a lot of inadvertently kind of enhance, or what's the word I'm looking for? Praise of that, because because of the cultural narrative that we have. Oh, look, you're so disciplined, or you're great, and you're like, look at what you're doing, and actually what the person might really need is to work on being able to take some time off, which
Absolutely.
can be really difficult as well, really difficult.
Yeah,
So
I think that goes along with weight loss compliments.
mm,
It's like, what are you saying that you're not saying by complimenting somebody on their behaviors?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, Gillian, I have one question that I ask everybody on this podcast, and that is, what does joyful nourishment mean to you, and how do you joyfully nourish yourself?
Oh, I love this question. So certainly, I love food, and so there are no there are no rules around food. And I thoroughly enjoy what I eat. Um, I do enjoy, at this time in my life, I enjoy going out and walking. That's nourishment for my body. When it's appropriate, there are days that it's not. Um, and I think the other two things that are really important in my life are listening to music. I've always been into music, and that brings me great joy. It can change how I'm feeling in the moment, maybe get me even moving my body because and singing and whatever, which I won't do in front of other people, but I love doing it, and it really changes my state. Um, and the other thing that's really important in my life is connecting with animals. And I love I love animals, and wild or not, they remind me of how to stay in the moment and how to experience care and love and whatever animals feel unconditionally, and that is possible. They don't go around judging, and so those are the things that really really nourish me.
Thank you. Yeah, I would definitely agree with you on some of those. That would also be nourishing for me. So, where can people find you, Gillian, if they are looking to connect with you, find out more about the work that you do?
Yeah, my website is healthier outcomes with an S at the end, healthieroutcomes.com. Um, and I'm a little bit on social media. I also have a Substack that you can find on my website. You can link to it, or uh, click on to go to. And yeah, that's pretty much
That's
where
cool.
I live online.
Yeah, so I'll put some links to that in the show notes. And
Thank you.
thank you so much, Gillian, for being part of the podcast and for having this conversation with me. And hopefully it'll be really helpful for the people listening too.
Yeah, I hope so. And thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. The Joyful Nourishment podcast is produced with no financial backing, and your support means a lot to keep this project going. If this episode has been helpful in any way, please consider liking, subscribing, or leaving a 5-star review on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on. This helps the podcast to be found by others. And of course, you can also forward this episode to a friend whom you think may benefit. Find out more about what I offer on straightforwardnutrition.com, and if you're interested in working with me, please use the link in the show notes to book in for a free initial 30-minute session. And finally, please come and join the Joyful Nourishment community over on Substack, unless you're there already, by subscribing to my newsletter using the link below.